Monte Marcum, welcome to Acquiring Minds.
Thanks, Will. It's great to be here. I feel like it's the dittos of every week now.
Well, Monte, you acquired an established franchise business. In fact, two of them. Two territories of the same franchise system, but from different owners, came up for sale at the same time. They were contiguous territories, so it seemed like a great opportunity and may yet turn out to be, but it has not gone according to plan, to say the least. And we are going to hear today how this path is not for the faint of heart. But first, Monte, please start us off with some background. Who are you, and how did you decide to buy a business?
Who am I? That's a tough existential question, but I guess first and foremost, I am Virginia Tech Hokie. I got a mechanical engineering degree from Virginia Tech, and also got an MBA from Duke. So big fan of what is now the ACC, although we'll see what the money lines change from that. I got about 25 years of mostly corporate-related experience. I started off with IBM in Research Triangle Park. I lived in the Raleigh-Durham area of North Carolina. Did Big Blue for about 8 years and started to get a little itchy of doing something more bigger, faster. So then I got the edge to try a little bit of a startup back in the summer of 2008. And some people might remember that turned out to be a really bad year to do startup activities. And so after a couple of months, that didn't work out. And then I got a job into a niche consulting firm that I was with for almost close to 15 years and taking a couple of years off. That did predominantly facilities management outsourcing. So negotiating large outsourcing agreements with large enterprise providers, with large enterprise clients around the world. I did take a break from that when my son was on the way at the time with my ex-wife because of the travel. And it was traveling about 75%, and worked locally here for a few years with someone I knew from IBM. And then as that path decided to go in a direction I just wasn't happy with in supply chain, and then the brute force of working with Asia, I got back into consulting about 2013 and stayed with that until really this year. And looking at that back, I was a road warrior for a long time and realized I was missing a lot of time with my kids. They're 10 and 12 now. And so I missed a lot of formative years traveling a lot to make ends meet. And it was a job I was good at. It was a really good group of people that are still up and running and connected with them. But once COVID hit, I looked at my diamond status on Delta and realized that I did earn it outright, and that one day it was going to go away. And when you go from doing over 100,000 miles a year to ground stop, it changes some things. And most notably, I was home permanently in this kind of little office I have here, which my wife now tells me she's going to decorate if I ever do any more of these. But it was a big change to be around your kids a lot more. I was dating someone seriously. And then we actually just got married back in October of 2022. But it was a moment where, hey, I had a really cool little condo in downtown Durham, an old renovated tobacco manufacturing warehouse, and walked everywhere, and then I was on the road. COVID hits, and like everyone else with the COVID story, things change. And then, having the family time, and it was like, hey, time to grow up and get a real house. So we did that and moved to the suburbs a little over 2 years ago. And then as, things started progressing last year, I saw that the road was going to start coming back. I mean, it's just the nature of being in niche management consulting. You got to be there with companies. And, I started thinking, is this really what I want to do? I'm almost 50 now. And, I started having those real deep questions of where do I want to get into this? And I actually had been listening to a lot of Bigger Pockets and other podcasts last year, trying to do a little soul searching. And ironically, it was on a Bigger Pockets podcast right around Memorial Day last year that Cody Sanchez was on, and, had her spiel about, buying businesses. And I was like, you know what? I actually thought about doing that back before my son was born. I had looked at a few little businesses, thought about it. I was a lot younger then, a lot less mature, a lot less world experience. And then when I find out that we're going to have a baby, that took a pause for obvious reasons. So as that seed got planted, it ripened a lot faster this time. And it was actually June 1st that I met with my first broker to start exploring the ideas of, hey, I'm going to go buy something. I don't know what it is, but I want to make a go for it. I want to take a risk. I'm old enough now that I got some reserves in case something happens. I got a good support system at home, stable, we're structured, so we're going to go for it. And that was actually 1 year ago yesterday, so it's almost serendipitous that we're talking now. But I had that first lunch meeting with a broker. So pause there.
Monte, the curious how, if you were listening to Bigger Pockets, and for those in the audience who don't know, Bigger Pockets is a series of, it's a media company that produces all sorts of content, including lots and lots of podcasts about real estate investing. So it's for the real estate investing path to independence and wealth. If you were listening to Bigger Pockets, why were you, and then heard Cody Sanchez, why were you attracted to buying a business rather than, I guess, what you thought you were going to do, which is investing in real estate?
Cash flow. Mm-hmm. You start looking at that, and it takes a long time to progress up to have real cash flow in terms of real estate. And so as I started looking at that, one of the paths that I thought about going down was, my wife turned her old house into a short-term rental. So she's been managing on that. We're not allowed to. And, that could have been a path. And part of my consulting was exposed to corporate real estate as well as the facilities management aspect of it operationally. But then you start to, really look, what is it going to take to actually start generating the income that you would need to ultimately displace a W-2? And it takes a long time in real estate. And I don't have that much time on my side, relatively speaking. And so I was like, hey, then buying the business triggered back up because of the economics of how things work with the multiples and the potential cash flows and all the tax benefits and all of those types of things. And it's something that I really wanted to do. I had lots of little enterprises when I was growing up as a kid. It's something I knew I wanted to do really young, but I took a very risk-averse career path, for better or for worse, going into corporate and consulting. So something is like, I want to give it a go. I know I won't regret having done it. But I don't want to get to a point in my life and be like, I really wish I did that. And it's really too late now. And so that kind of self-reflection moment of a lot of kind of like just mindset thinking got into it. I was like, yeah, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to commit to do it. And I'll listen to a lot of the, the Kool-Aid or the other, things that come up. Only 10% of the people that actually pursue it close on a deal. First deal's your hardest. And I was like, I'm going to get through it. And, because I'm, generally speaking, a pretty strong-willed individual. And I like to drive things. And so I was like, I'm going to figure out how to get this done by the end of the year. That was my goal 1 year ago. And I got pretty close. So
let's hear. So you meet with a broker on June 1st. Yep. And then what do the next 6 months look like? Give us a picture of your search.
Well, first I find out that that business brokers don't work like commercial or more like real estate brokers, either residential or commercial, where they get paid a commission out of the transaction. It doesn't work that way. Really, the broker's almost always on the sales side unless you want, as a buyer, pay for that. And I wasn't ready for that yet. So I spent a couple months doing just basic networking of kind of just getting educated on the process, the financials, legal, accountants, and started looking at just, some basic deal flow off brokers and off biz buy sell, like most people. I found one really early on that I was interested in and kept in touch with them for a couple of months. And actually got pretty serious where I had 3 LOIs on a small technical maintenance company that is an area that I really understood from my consulting background. Worked with a lot of life sciences. Unfortunately, those 3 owners in a C Corp structure couldn't get aligned to really make a transaction happen, along with some other material adverse events. And, that those 3 LOIs never went anywhere other than a lot of conversation and time. But I was still looking at multiple things. I worked with a franchise consultant and looked at some more of what they were calling the less active, because the term semi-passive is a little passe. But we did look at some different franchise models. But, to start up for one of those really wasn't as interesting for me, just because of the capital requirements and the protracted time to cash flow. And as time went on, did some due diligence on a few firms, but then as this laboratory services technical maintenance company was clearly not going to happen in the late October, early November timeframe, this franchise resale was presented to me from a franchise consultant that I've been working with. And it checked all the buy boxes. It was the things that a lot of your listeners or guests, talk about. It is recurring maintenance revenue. It is a niche, basically a niche janitorial business to categorize it. It's all B2B. It's environmentally friendly. It has safety benefits. It has lots of good characteristics that you can really promote responsibly well because they're actually true. And so looking at all those things is like, that sounds kind of cool. And then, layering into that, this whole notion of where people are looking at the franchise scaling aspect of it and rolling up multiple franchises, from what research I had done, finding two contiguous, next door neighbor franchise territories that are performing in a network where no one else is interested in them is very rare, especially where it's in the location that I live in. Like I'm dead middle in my span. And so I was like, that seems really interesting. Little smaller than what I was originally looking for. And we can get into the risk of small. But it made enough sense that I papered it. And, it took me from the time I found out about it until I had my LOI out to about 3 weeks.
Monte, what were some of your financial parameters? Like what was the target SDE?
Wanted to target at least $400K to just have enough cushioning for debt service and, to, get close to where I was at a W-2. So that was, I was looking in the 4 to 6 range as you, many of you already talked about. That's kind of the initial sweet spot. I think a lot of self-funded and independent people in my position generally kind of look at. Those are really hard to find. The lab services one I had was dead on with that. It was a 400 SDE. It was fairly priced, I thought, given the asset class and the customers that they already had that were under contract and maintenance and recurring. So this one was a little smaller when I combined them together. But it still hit those primary boxes that, I have an engineering degree and an MBA. So there is this risk of analysis paralysis that I can get into. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. Like it checks all these things off well enough. It makes sense to go forward because it's in a location that I wanted. I didn't want to move anywhere. Co-parenting with custody relationship with my kids. So that's off the table. I'm later in stage of career compared to a lot of people. So the idea of moving is totally off. So it just made sense, looking at all the things that I would want to get out of something that even though it's smaller, we're still upside.
And we're going to get into it because we haven't told people exactly what it is. But first, so interesting that you got the deal from this franchise consultant you were working with. One of the things that has been talked about by my guests who bought established franchise businesses as you did is that it can sometimes be, if it's an older established franchise, I think yours isn't maybe that old, but if it's an older established franchise, A or B, looks like there could be a great roll-up opportunity. It can be hard to break into the franchise. The existing owners sell to each other. So finding an established franchise business of a brand you might want to work with can be difficult. So I wonder if working with franchise consultants could be a workaround there. Do you think that can be extrapolated from your experience with this consultant you worked with?
Yeah, he was great. I still talk with him. He checks in with me. Super high integrity and honest and well connected across the region. Happily would recommend him to anyone because I do think, from a buyer's perspective, it's a resource that there's some financial arrangement with the brand or whomever that doesn't affect the buyer to use. And so they're very upfront about that and transparent. So it's a no cost obligation to work with them. It was a very structured process in going from a disc profile in terms of behaviors and interests and personality types all the way through what you like to do, what you hate, in order to present brands. And as most franchise consultants, they generally work with the smaller mid-tier brands. This particular brand wasn't one he had worked with before because it just had come up on his resale radar. And so, he's very transparent with me. He's like, I've never worked with them. I don't know much. I'll find out as much information as I can, but you told me you wanted something that's already existing rather than a startup. Most of the consultants tend to work with startup or, initial franchise territories because those brands are trying to build out rather than resales. And so it was a little bit outside of his wheelhouse and different, but still great to work with from my perspective.
Yeah, and thank you for that clarification at the end there. The thing about franchise consultants is that the way they position themselves is that they're recruiting you to do a new territory or a new location of a franchise. So that's why I was interested that he brought you an actual resale opportunity. All right, Monte, so tell us what Filta is directly.
Filta is a services brand, and the short story is between deep fryers.
Cleaning deep fryers.
Cleaning deep fryers. It's a niche that most people say I never even knew that existed, and I didn't know it existed either, like many others. The brand started in England back in the 90s, actually. So as a franchise, it's been around since I believe around 1997 or 98. So it's got 25 plus years. It is national across the U.S. I believe that the network has done something along the order of $100 million total aggregated revenue. And like any other brand, they're looking to 5x that over the next 5 years. And essentially what it is there's some specialized equipment that Filta has an intellectual property license to that is part of the royalty structure. So we have these machines that will go into commercial kitchens and first perform a microfiltration, which the analogy is like dialysis for cooking oil. So these machines will take in hot 350 degree cooking oil out of deep fryers and filter them down to 2 microns. To take out all the particulates and any other matter in the oil, which extends the life of cooking oil, which has several benefits to the kitchens. One is it extends the life of cooking oil, which is becoming a relatively expensive commodity. It also filters it down at a level that even takes out things like gluten. Where, again, going back to the dialysis analogy, a human red blood cell is 8 microns. Gluten is something 15 to 20 microns, and this equipment will take it down to 2 microns. So all that's done under heat and pressure, again, with proprietary technology. So that's part of the services. While that filtration is happening, we use specialized commercial vacuum cleaners to suck out all the sludge and the really gross parts of the deep fryers, and then, use some environmentally friendly, organic, biodegradable detergents, basically, or degreasers to wipe out the walls of the fryers. So again, it takes out all the sludge that start to build up and make food taste bad. So especially for kitchens that have a higher quality of their fried food that they want to keep at a standard, it really provides them a food quality benefit. And other areas, the waste oil is an issue with a lot of kitchens, and part of our service is we take away the waste oil in our vans. And in several of the areas that we work with, they don't even have the waste bins out back anymore. They've gotten rid of them because they attract rodents, they attract vermin, they stink, they look terrible. And so a lot of our customers, as I got into this, had gotten rid of those altogether. So a key part of our service is also extracting or taking away the waste oil and then helping them replace it. So when you see that, it's also interesting that, we have special PPE, 450 degrees safety rated gloves and aprons and all these preventative measures to make sure it's done safely, because we are working with hot oil. But the key tenet of the service is basically actively managing deep fryer oil. Again, something I've never heard of, to October of last year until it was presented to me. So very
Monty,
niche.
for people who don't have back of the kitchen experience, as I did not, the value proposition is very strong. Why is this so appealing to a kitchen? Why doesn't, because historically, doesn't just somebody on the kitchen staff just clean the deep fryer?
Yeah, that's the worst job in the kitchen. It is literally the job that people would, the low hanging or the low person on the totem pole would have to do is go clean the fryers, because they have to drop out the oil, and sometimes they would fill it up in buckets and find a place to go and dump it and get out all the sludge. They don't have the equipment. They would do it every 2 weeks and stuff would build up. When I talk about sludge, it's like, the thick flour, like chicken tenders and all that just drains out to the bottom. So, it's dirty work. It is dirty. And there's also a safety component. And one of the things that I think I'm pretty proud of in looking back is, out of all of this, close to 100 customers, we've lost one since the transition. And that one was a reduction of a key budget reduction for a corporate account that was working in the school system. So much so that they also cut kitchen staff, which in the restaurant industry is unheard of to cut kitchen staff. And then unfortunately, 2 weeks after they cut our service, one of their older cooks was dirtying their fryers and taking the hot oil down a step and got badly burned, 2nd-degree burns on his arm because he didn't have the proper PPE. And you hate hearing about that. I mean, it's just like, ugh. But at the same time, the value proposition is we do it faster, safely. We do it more environmentally friendly, and we are responsible in how we handle all the materials. And it's almost kind of fun when I've gone into the kitchen with some of the guys and like, hey, the Filta guy's here. Like, they're excited because they know they don't have to do that. And so even from some of the accounts, a great example is we recently started working with Whole Foods here. And the team lead at the Whole Foods in their local store said, I don't even care about the cost savings. The fact that my people don't have to do this anymore is a win, hands down. And, oh, by the way, they are saving a lot of money by extending the life of their oil because they're going through it so quickly. So it's a pretty clear value proposition that I thought stood for itself. And then, from the acquisition standpoint, I joke a lot, but it's probably not so much as a joke. It's the competition is really self-performance. There is no direct competitor that provides the same service. There are some technologies that will do fresh oil tanks in and waste oil out, but they also don't provide the cleaning service as well, which really is important, especially to get into some of these heavier using kitchens.
I always wonder, Monte, when I hear about something that just seems to make so much sense but isn't yet mainstream, especially if it's been around for a while. This Filta has been around for 25 years, as you said. Why do you think it isn't the standard for kitchens and people are still kind of learning about it? And Whole Foods, your local Whole Foods, just is hiring you now.
Yeah, I think it's it's probably been a very small runway up in terms of the brand growth. I think this is a long way of saying I don't have a great answer, but I think it's, as the marketing gets out there, the word gets out. I don't think there's just as much of an awareness of it yet, but I do get the impression that it's changing. Especially as you start to see some of the factors that are going into, what we're providing. Every time I describe it to someone that's a chef or works in the kitchen, we're like, oh my God, that's fantastic. I love that idea. So it's pretty rare that we get, the highs in terms of not having an interest in it. But it is something I just don't think the word has gotten out that far yet, but I do feel like it's getting ready to change.
Yeah. Yeah. Really, really interesting. I mean, when you first told me about it, I was like, well, even without restaurant experience myself, like the value prop is screaming. So that's really neat. Yeah. And let's get a little bit more of a picture of the business. So roughly what do you charge customers? So I guess it's monthly. You go by what, twice a month, once a week? And then what does that cost?
It varies. We actually correlate the service cost with the price of fresh oil, just because that becomes part of the cost savings metric. But if you go into a kitchen, you could say roughly, a standard kitchen could be, $80 to $100 per service charge, for 2 simple fryers. There's
visit.
Per visit, right? And sometimes we visit some once a week, sometimes twice a week. The biggest one that we personally serve is one of the local hospitals here, where we're in there every day because they're cooking from 5 a.m. until 11 p.m. And so they're burning it through so rapidly that, we filter one day, change the next day, filter on Wednesdays, change on Thursdays. And it's just a cycle. And it's also one where they don't have a place to put their waste oil. So they really do rely on us to come in and make sure they're taken care of. So the frequency is really dependent on what the customer needs. And the majority of them are at least once a week. And we have probably about a third of our customer base doing 2 times a week. So and that's actually what works out best for a lot of higher volumes is we do the microfiltration once, and then we do the fresh oil, change out the second time that week. And in many cases, these kitchens have worked with us to design their menus around when we're changing out their oil. So really, if they're going to have a heavy fry, super sticky, right? So if they're going to have a heavy fried chicken day, they often will want their oil changed out the next day. Or, we had University of North Carolina had a big event where they were bringing in everyone to do their football reseeding. Like, we want to change out everything because this is a premier event and we want to have everything perfect. So we go in there, and even though the oil probably didn't need to be changed, they said, we want it changed out because we want it perfect. So, in many cases, we'll respond to demands as much as we can. But a lot of it is we get on a regular schedule with a lot of these clients, and they definitely expect it. I mean, they do their just-in-time oil ordering in line with when we have our service times, even though we're not under contract. It's all a handshake in terms of the timing, but their oil comes the day before we're planning to service them. So it's a pretty sticky factor. That's what I've seen at least so far in the last 4 months.
And what does it look like? You've got this proprietary machine device in the back of a van, and it's one driver with his van and the device in the van. Is that what it looks like? And so he's a driver, and but he's also the guy actually doing the operating the machine.
Yep.
The technician. Yep. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. So the technicians work generally independently. They also have waste oil tanks in the vans, and then they have a ramp that has a hand truck cart with a vacuum cleaner that's designed to suck out this kind of material.
And just to give a picture of the potential of this business, you'd mentioned to me the guy who's up my way in DC, the franchisee who's grown quite large. Give us a picture of his business so we can kind of imagine what the potential is.
I mean, he's in the DC area, so he's serving the Verizon Center, FedEx Field, Georgetown, all of the universities in that area. A lot of real high, big volume stands. Yeah, I think he's probably got about a dozen technicians. I think he's got, I don't know, eight or so box trucks. I can't even remember the volume of waste oil that he goes through in terms of his collection, but I mean, he's, I don't know his exact numbers, but it's a pretty large operation, relatively speaking, within the network. I actually went to go visit him on a field trip probably about 2 months ago, sometime in early April, just to see the operation, see how he's put his things together and see how he's developed some of his own efficiencies in terms of scaling out. He's also been doing, I think, 9 or 10 years as well. So a lot of experience, but that's also kind of one of the good markers when you do get into a good network. People are really willing to do that. Like, hey, come see my shop. He spent probably about 2.5, 3 hours with my wife and I, just showing us around, saying what he's been doing. And he's clearly far more advanced than where we are now, but at least it gives you a target. It gives you what it could look like into the future. And certainly I came back with some ideas and pictures of things that I want to start working on as soon as we get a few other things stabilized first.
Well, Monte, you're making this seem like a dream business. And we know that that's not where this is headed. Before we start getting into where dream crashes with reality, can you tell us a little bit more about the actual 2 businesses you bought? Any numbers around them? Just as many bullet points as you can.
Combined together is about $1 million of total combined sales price. Is about a 3.5 multiple, which is slightly higher than a lot of the multiples you hear before. But I also could justify the multiple because 98%, 99% of the revenue, I did that math the other day, is recurring. So we have B2B recurring services revenue with large, well-known names. There's that says a lot. Like that justifies having an extra multiple. I also did an 80-20 on our revenue, and it takes half of our clients to hit 80% of the revenue. So there's also a good distribution around the client base of revenue as well, which is, again, a good risk mitigation. There's some concentration points for sure, but it does have at least a distribution. So it was a little bit higher of a multiple, but I thought it made sense. And then, looking ahead strategically, the roll-up concept of the strategy is, put these together and develop it further. That multiple should only be able to increase as you scale it out, have a much broader territory.
Sure.
That I'm barely 1% penetrated, I believe, in the whole territories that we have.
Oh, you're 1% penetrated in your existing territories, leaving aside acquiring other territories.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And when you said $1 million, Monte, that was your purchase price, or that was the aggregate sales across the 2 businesses?
Purchase price, yeah.
Okay. And what can you give us a sense of what sales is across one or both together or individually, the businesses?
Combined, it's combined run rate on everything's like roughly around 800.
Just kind of quickly on how this happened. Both owners just wanted to sell coincidentally, and both owners got put in touch with your franchise consultant. And did they expect to be sold as a package, or it was just all coincidence and it just worked out that way?
Yeah, mostly coincidence. They actually didn't know the franchise consultants. I think they had gone through franchise flippers or something else that was brand sponsored, and it was also in Biz by Sell, I believe. Came to me through the franchise consultant through his resale channel. They obviously knew each other. One had had his territory for about 17 years. The other started his about 6 or 7 years ago. So they knew each other, but they operated quite differently, which, I came to find out in spades about how the different operations were done. But it was, I don't think there was anything on their part like looking at it together. I mean, I did make my LOIs contingent on having them both, for better or for worse at the time. But, to me, I saw the synergy play being very important, especially given just what I'd been educated on with franchise in the territories. Like having the adjacency is really valuable, especially as you start building it up. And then hopefully soon this year, we'll start getting on some resiliency. But, it's when one little hiccup goes off that we can get into, it's still small. It's still small.
Well, right. And I guess because even collectively or as a package, it was still a little bit on the low end of SEE you were looking for. So one of them by itself definitely would have been outside your range. And was one significantly bigger than the other, or were they about the same size in terms of revenue and just overall operation?
Yeah, one was probably about 40 or 50% more than the other in terms of revenue.
So you close, you said it's been about 4 months, so you close in February?
January 18th. So that's close to my end of the year target.
Yeah. Yes. Congratulations on that.
It was the second one. Yeah, and it was the second round of LOIs on the company. So
no. Setting a 6 month, I'm going to buy a business in 6 months. That was already a pretty aggressive timeline, and the fact that you got within 18 days of it is deserves congratulations. So tell us, take us wherever you want to. Start us wherever you want to. What happens in the first couple of weeks? When does it become clear that this might be more challenging than you thought?
Well, the first 2 days were smooth.
The first 2 days.
First 2 days were smooth.
So day 3, it hits the fan.
The third day is when a piece of equipment goes down. And these machines are working with hot oil, which can start to degrade internal plumbing and mechanicals and electrical issues, and so you start out with leaks and issues. So I was out of the owner's garage working on it for days 3 and 4, until we could get it back up and running and operational. And it became real clear to me when one of these things goes down without having any backup or resiliency, it's a big impact. Again, going back, a lot of these customers or clients that we have really expect us to be there and take care of them. And when one of the pieces of equipment goes out, we can't. And it hurts. I mean, it's a lot of stress, because there's no easy solution, and people have to start jumping through hoops just to keep the basic things going. So, I had a couple of initial equipment issues, things kind of stabilized, throughout January. And it's okay, you can start to take a breath.
Monte, so how many machines did you buy? How many machines do you have operating? 5. Okay. So one goes down, you're down 20% of your service capacity. Okay, continue.
And then when the second one goes down, you're down 40%.
Yep.
And then, probably, getting into March is when I have one employee that just, I could tell was going to be a little bit more of a challenge. The others have been fantastic people. But one of them, I knew he had some challenges, and, some of it was not his fault. He was in a car wreck last year that, he got injured pretty badly on his hand. And so that was causing him pain, and he was getting older. So, trying to work through that was a little bit difficult. I did have someone that I wanted to elevate up to be an operations manager who was working a regular route. So just trying to find someone, 6 weeks into it, it's really difficult to know exactly what you want to do to hire, but you need to do it. So as we got into March, it's trying to look for ways to hire people, along with trying to get ahead of some of the maintenance issues on the stuff, because vans break down. Some of the vans have close to 300,000 miles on them. But probably when I first reached out to you back in March, when I was in one of many fetal position moments, was when one of the relatively new van engines blew up and totally went out. And not only was that a huge financial unexpected cost, then I had accounts down, so lost revenue. People jumping through hoops and trying to just keep things going was just difficult on everyone, coupled with all the other stuff I was dealing with. And it just was, that's where we get into that. It was hard. It was like a different level of hard that it's really hard to articulate how hard it is, because so many things are outside of any control that you could even imagine. And, just as we were doing our audio check starting out, the number of times I've heard people say, wow, I've never seen that before. I've never heard that before. I'm like, how is that possible? And, it's just, I'm starting to sign up. Difficult timing, difficult luck. The other part that, I'll go ahead and say it for you, is the day we close is also the day that my father's cancer got pretty serious looking. And I had some visions of working and building it out and doing some of the mechanical things with him, because he's real handy. He's still with us now, but it's really challenging for myself and the family, because we're really close. And so, I was on his hospital bed while he was getting ready to do chemotherapy when the van engine blew up, and then had a sales call planned the hour later, and we still made the sales call, and we actually won that account, and we serviced them this morning. So these good things happen, but it's been cross-threaded and woven with just some really heavy stuff. When these things break down and we have employee turnover, then in April, one of the guys, he's a Afghan vet, and he got hit by an IED. And he said, look, I got some sciatica and I just had a baby. My wife wants me to, take a pause. But I'm giving you 12 weeks notice. And, I was like, first panic. I was like, wait, did you say weeks? He's like, yeah, weeks. We'll hold you to it. And so he literally gave me 12 weeks notice. And he's like, I'm going to do whatever you need for 12 weeks. And then I'm taking a break and, probably not coming back. Then, the last couple of weeks, I've tried to make it so that he does want to come back. And he even told me last week, he's like, man, you're making this so hard for me to stay away. I think I might come back after he takes his month off. So, so we're working through that. But, it takes time to train up new people doing this. First and foremost, you got to have the safety training of how the equipment works, and making sure that they can go in, they know the protocols and handling it safely. And then the other biggest challenge we have is just getting into places. So every single kitchen is different. Access is different. Some is real simple of just walking right in. Others, you have to go through corporate security, bio hazard safety check. It's amazing the levels of challenge just to get into places. And then for new people to learn a route to be able to get in these places takes a lot of time. So, you won't just hire someone and have them ready to go in a week. It usually takes a couple of weeks, although, we got one really good one we hired 3 weeks ago, and, within the first week, he was ready to go on his own, and he's been doing great. He's even gotten unsolicited emails from clients saying what a great job he's doing.
Fantastic.
Yeah. It's easy to complain, but, in the restaurant world industry, you don't give me your biggest compliment is no complaints, because you're around people doing food services where people are real quick to complain.
And are the people that you hire for the technician roles from food service, or can they be from anywhere? What do their qualifications need to look like?
They can be from anywhere. Qualification is, show up, do a good job, be safe, be responsible. It's, it is a blue collar. It's, I equate it more to a niche janitorial job. But it's also helpful to have some technical skills or troubleshooting skills. For sure. Probably one of our longest serving technicians, I think, has been doing this for 7 years. So in this type of a space, I'm, one doing 7 years. My hops manager has been doing about 6 years. That's a long time, for this type of work, in my view. And I think, part of it is because they actually like the work, they like the people. There's a lot of independent autonomy that, when you're in the blue collar area, that you don't get. I'm not breathing down their shoulders and micromanaging whatsoever. Once people demonstrate that they're honest, ethical, and can do a good job, go let them do their jobs. And I've found that, that's actually been one of the refreshing things compared to dealing with, corporate consulting where, the politics are, just can get atrocious. And I was like, it's been nice not having to deal with, those kind of politics. So, it's a job. You got to have some strength because the equipment can be heavy. You got to be able to, lift some loads, like 75 pounds.
Yeah. It's physically, isn't it physically a little bit taxing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So Monte, I am hearing in the tone of your voice, resiliency, the word that I've heard you say, and even kind of a good-natured, reflections on all of this. But in our previous two conversations, I might have been literally catching you mid fetal position, but the tone was decidedly different. So square that circle for me.
So yeah, I mean, I'll go back. March and April, late February, March, April were probably the most stressful times I've ever had. I mean, it was, all of these hiccups going on with the business equated to like air traffic control. Like when a plane has an issue, all the flights the rest of the day are screwed up. So then people start complaining, and you can't just fix it immediately. And especially when a van blows up, I was down, about a third of our service capacity for almost 5 weeks. So that was super just stress, and then trying to put it all together and get everything done. It was just a level of ridiculous stress that, I look back and it's like, yeah, that really was awful. People were saying, you'll get through this. And, I had many, many times, especially back in, the March time frame, April, of like, what a mistake I made. And the other thing, I mean, I alluded to it earlier, but the stuff with my father hit me really hard. And when you have that much of your reserves just drained there's nothing left. Like there's just nothing left. And you're doing, like many people, 12, 16 hours a day, while trying to co-parent kids, while, realizing, the reality of his situation, especially after his clinical trial got canceled, the week before the van blew up. All that was hitting me, and it was just, it was excessive. I had many bawling moments with my wife of like, what did I do? And like, like anything else, would I have done this now knowing that I was going to have to be dealing with all these other things? Well, probably not. But, back in, November, December, everything was looking really good with us. It felt good.
And when you ask yourself that question now, would you do it over again? Is it a different answer? Or do you still feel like, yeah, no, I would not do it over again?
Something I still would want to have done, but I probably would have deferred. Like knowing where I am now in my personal life, I would have waited. I would have waited because, I'm going to spend the next 2 weeks with him. I'm not going to work on the business the next 2 weeks. I'm going to do a little bit, but I'm not going to work on it. I'm not going to do a lot of strategic things. I'm just going to wait. And just decided that's fine. Like, it doesn't have to be, rolling it up to, double, triple revenues in 9 months and all these kind of great headlines. Just, I'm not going to do that because I want to take my time elsewhere. I think it's more important. And so I guess, the maturation time, perhaps in the last 2 months, as we've talked a couple of times, is, the acceptance of what that reality looks like for us. And just, really learning to let go of some of the things that you can't control and, do your best around them. And I'm very fortunate. I call him St. John, our operations manager. I mean, he is one of the most wonderful people I've ever had the pleasure of working with. I mean, he's just a gem of a human being. He's really been holding so much together. And he's very empathetic because of challenges that he has on own that are very similar with our situation. And he's just doing such an amazing job. I just adore him and his work ethic, and really the other guys too. But him in particular has really helped through. But talking with some other people, as you introduced me to, and has been helpful. But also getting out of the constant equipment issues. Like we finally got our first week. This was our first week without an equipment issue, a major one. Had a minor one. But, every single week, almost every day, I was dealing with an equipment issue. And it was so frustrating because, you can't do diligence. And I had some misunderstandings, or, we weren't clear about what the brand inspections were with respect to some of the equipment, and, it started going off, and, you just can't control it. And it's just, it was so, stressful doesn't even hold a candle to it. Like, it was just so hard and just crushing of like, I got nothing left to give. And like, all these people are constantly texting me things and calling with problems. It's just like, you almost got to like a PTSD to where like a text message alarm would go off on my phone. I'm like, now what? Like, that's not the reaction you want to have. When someone calls, it's like, when one of the employees calls, it's like, what's the problem now? Like, it's, and it's not the right mindset you want to be in, but when it's 4:00 in the morning or 2:00 in the morning and they're calling you, that's not good news. It's never good news. I even had one yesterday at 4:00 phone call because one of our locks at our warehouse got messed up from someone else. It's just like, it's tough to get past all those things. And, part of that, I'll just go back and equate it as difficult timing, some difficult luck. I don't think anyone has been, underhanded or anything, or like, malicious in any way, shape, or form. Maybe trying to put the two together at the same time. Some people are acting, well, you took on a lot. And well, I like to do hard things, but I didn't think it was going to be that hard to put something that I thought was working solely together. Wrong. It's blazingly hard. Blazingly hard to make operational changes to it, much less improvements when stuff's just not working and you're in a constant reactive mode. And I hate being reactive. It's just 180% outside of my personality. I want to have a plan and a strategy and working towards it. And, I was the dork in high school that, college that, I was done big projects 2 days before because I wanted to be lazy the day before it was due, instead of the guy procrastinating and pulling the all-nighter. That's just my personality. So having to react to things, it hurt. And so now you got around a week where it hasn't hurt.
The nature of hard, this is a theme that's come up. I remember first with John Schuler, who bought an appliance repair business, and we came back on the podcast, and it was his update episode probably back in February. And he was talking about,
I heard it
fine now, but okay. Yeah. And I think you may have reached out to John. It was a hard year. And we talked about, he talked about like, I had heard small business was hard, but I didn't really understand what that meant. And it reminds me of like what you're saying right now. It's like difficult to articulate this type of hard.
Yeah.
You're a guy who has been successful in his career and is hardworking and clearly takes whatever it is you're applying yourself to seriously. Why is the nature of these challenges so different than any other challenges that you've experienced in your professional life so far? If you can try to articulate, I'm basically pressing you to try to articulate it.
Hard. I think a lot of it is the extent that you have zero bloody control. Like you can't. There's no control over it when some of these things happen. Is you got no control, and so this feeling of like you're spiraling because things are breaking that shouldn't be breaking, but you have no control to get ahead of them to prevent them from breaking. And then when they do break, then there's this downstream of consequences that is just painful. And then it's just like the basic worries of like, well, what if I lose the biggest revenue customer? Well, what if one of these critical guys just decides to leave? Like, I don't have a backup for him. And it's like, what do we do? Like, I can't just jump in and replace someone that I haven't even seen all the stops they go to yet. And it's just there's a little bit of that terror that's in there on top of I just took this big risk. I got all these debt payments and all these other things that are lingering over, and I haven't made anything to taken any salary or anything out of it just yet. And by the way, my wife got laid off in March, and that was our health insurance plan, and so that was also a backup option in case something wasn't working out. Well, that eviscerated. So we're looking at like, okay, what do we really do now? This is a different kind of hard. Like, so I think it's the hard where, when you're in the kind of corporate or more white collar, the hard, frankly, is much more like politics and kind of annoying things like that. But like the consequences aren't as dramatic. The potential consequences of this.
Lower stakes.
Yeah, I mean, you're dealing with like, you're responsible for employees and their livelihoods with this equipment, and when the equipment goes down, these are hourly people. Like they don't have a lot of reserves, and they're kind of living on check to check, and you feel responsible for that, but you can't do anything. Like this sense of like this almost helplessness of like when all this stuff is breaking, I just can't fix it quickly, and when you're in an environment where you're able to fix things quickly, especially like in my background, I was, niche expertise management consultant. It's because I already knew the answer. Like when clients would have issues, it's like, well, we've seen this before, and here's 3 things you do with it. I'd recommend this one. Like, it was almost like a rote motion, which was part of the reasons why I thought it'd be good for a different challenge. But it's this level of hard because the solutions are there, but the time and the impact and the ability to make those solutions happen isn't readily available. You don't have these, unlimited resources, right? Like, I don't have, $100,000 that I can just go write a check and buy a new van and just have it up and running the next day. Like that's not necessarily available. But that's what it might need to take. Well, then you got to go down a path and figure all that out. And, that's what I'm looking at now is like, how am I going to finance a new truck? And how am I going to make it responsible within the cash flow and everything else? And by the way, we want to offer benefits to the employees, which is, not common in this area, but I think it's the right thing to do. We've already started a 401k plan to where, you can get some good feedback on that. But the hard is, the reason why it's such a long answer and it's so hard to articulate, it's because it's so hard. Like it's the emotional reserves that when you get down to a point of just like, I feel like I've been beat up so much, like there's nothing left. Like you can keep kicking, but there's nothing left to bleed out. So looking back at it was just miserable. And, it took a lot of family intervention to help me like start to elevate back up and like see the big picture and talk to others and like kind of go through it. And, the number of times I heard people say, it'll get better. And it's like, no, it doesn't feel any better. And then when you get your first breath, which maybe is serendipitous today that, I had a week without equipment issues to record on a Friday afternoon. Okay. It is getting a little bit better. Like, okay, we got a good tech start and nothing broke this week. And John would constantly remind me, he's like, today's a good day. I was like, what? He's like, nothing broke. Today's a good day. Like, so then, this reframing of celebrating those wins that you would just completely look past in kind of like a, again, a corporate life of, what a good day looks like. A good day is when like nothing breaks down and it just goes smoothly. Like I haven't seen that since day 2.
Yeah. Yeah.
I got 2 of them this week.
Well, glad that we're talking today then, Monte. One of the other things that you'd said to me was that nothing has ever made you feel so not yourself. Like you don't feel like yourself, or when you were having the fetal position moments, you really didn't feel like yourself. What did you mean by that?
I mean, I was basically at home. I was a train wreck. I mean, I'll admit it. I mean, and I'm still not that fun to be around right now. It's still a lot. I've been working on it. I mean, I've been working a lot, again, mindset shifting, but, I wasn't having fun. I wasn't like just doing like the joy things in life, because, the business was so hard. The transition was so hard. Things were breaking. I mean, I'm, frankly worried about my family for valid reason. And like, that's a drain. And when those reserves go down and you realize you're just pushing, but you're not going anywhere and you're not having a good time either. Like it's like, I kind of tend to think of myself as more positive and, happy-go-lucky and like fun. But I wasn't having any fun. I mean, it was just no fun at all. Like I didn't have the capacity for like fun and joy. And it was rough. And it's like, this isn't how I want to be. Like I didn't get into this to live this kind of a life. I got into it to live a little bit of a different life. I didn't expect to like, just walk to the mailbox and collect checks every day and that's it. But I did expect that I was going to be able to do some other things. I didn't get to exercise very regularly. And so that has a mental, physical wear down. I found that I was, hardly eating and lost 15 pounds in 3 months. And, wow. 4 of them I probably could have used to lose after the holidays, but, The others I did it. I put 4 of them back on in the last month, but because I started exercising again. But you get out of like the things that are like healthy lifestyle options of regular exercising and eating well and frequently, and you kind of feel like this zombie state of like, and then again I turn the iPhone off intentionally, but it's like as soon as a call would come through, I could feel my stress level rise up because no phone call was good news.
Yeah.
And it's just like, that's not the way, that's not who I am. Like usually you would expect like, hey, someone's reached out to me. I want to take this phone call. Now it's like, what now? And I I could feel myself losing patience. I just wasn't feeling the deal. Or really putting a good effort into, shifting away from that. But that's what I meant by not feeling myself. I was like, who am I? Like, I had sort of looks in the mirror, like, what are you doing? Like, and you can't just hit the pause button.
Another thing that we talked about a little bit, Monte, was, what people in your network were telling you is like, it'll get better. And in fact, I have heard from some people that part of what does make it hard is that you're feeling for the first time a lot of these crises. And later, I think it was Reg Zeller, later you learn or you build a thicker skin, not to say that, if you're feeling the pain now that there's weakness there, but you just later realize that you can just roll with punches more easily because you've felt that many more punches. And so I asked you if on the same point of like, oh, it'll get better, which sounds a little, dismissive, like maybe it won't get better. But is there some redeeming value to all of this hardship in that you're building a muscle so that when you're sitting atop your 2 Filta territories next year, you are just better equipped to deal with these problems? Like you're building muscle, building skill. Your answer was no, but answer it for me again.
I think a little bit, and it just depends on what the issue is. Like, when something big blows up, that's never going to feel good. But if a van were to blow up and I had a backup plan that I could easily snap into, because I've already done the strategy to think it through, which is up in my head, I just haven't had time to do it. I'd feel a whole lot better. But it's not that you want to just keep taking it. I think also, I guess equate it back is it's not the taking the punches. It's having gone through the experience of understanding what the negative consequence of those events happening are. And so once that happens and you can see like the relative scale or spectrum of like, this happens, is it going to be a huge negative impact or, not that big of a deal. Like, that guy complains all the time. He's not going to fire you. Versus like, oh, if that were to happen, now I'm in real trouble. Yeah. And that's probably a better way I would look at it, is not the thicker skin, but it's the understanding of what's going to happen, the if then else. If this happens, then this is what the impact or consequence or, the loss or the, whatever that outcome is going to look like. Until you're going to think the worst. And that's probably what makes it so hard, is the anxiety of not knowing how bad is this going to get. Mm-hmm. And, so I'd look at it a little bit more that way. I mean, I'm sure like, once you get beat up enough and then you don't need it, you can take it a little bit easier. But I think it's also, that it's not going to be that bad, whatever the negative impact is. I think that's probably how I would look at it.
Just a little bit on the tactical. So what did you do when your van blew up and you didn't have, $100,000 liquid to just stroke a check and buy a new one?
I said, oh shit. And then what did you do? And then John came over and we were looking at this monitor and we rebuilt the schedule. And then he started just, okay, here's what we're going to do. And he started just handling it. Like he started taking over. We compressed the routes. We shifted a few things around between him and one other. And he just started plowing through it. And I was like, I can't ask you to do this. He's like, this is what I do. Like that's his answer. And he just kept it together. And it was to a point where, he'd worked a couple like 25-hour days And he's like, that's what we have to do. It's like, I can't ask you to do anymore. It got to one point, I was like, no, you can't go out again right now. Like, go sleep. Like, that was really what held it together was St. John. Because, he had enough experience to know where all the ins and outs were to be able to go in and do it. Like, 2 months into it, I know how to do the job, but first, I don't want to spend my time in the van going around cleaning fryers. That's not what I wanted to get into this for. But second, like, I didn't know how to get into many of these places. And, then it becomes another risk event of like, well, how much do I want to tell people that I don't know how to get in there? And then have them think like, A, you don't care about them as a customer, or, again, you start spiraling in this what if. And that's really what makes it hard, is because you don't know that one little innocuous thing that you might say or do that then has huge financial or otherwise ramifications happening. And that's the hard part. And so, when the van blew up, it was out for 3.5 weeks, and John double duty. And then, at the same time was also trying to train up new people that woefully did not work out back then. And so, he carried a big load that I can't express how much I appreciate him doing that. And he's still doing it now, because he sees the vision.
You seem like somebody who would express that directly to your employee. But if you haven't, or you feel like you haven't done it adequately enough, make sure you play this for him.
Oh, I told him about it a couple hours ago.
Good. Monte, I want to close out with revisiting just the concept of buying small. So we when we were talking about the transaction, we talked a lot about that, what your SDE range was. This was a little bit smaller, but there seemed to be all these appealing things to it, which to this opportunity, which I totally agree with. But one of the things that is said about buying small, buying a business that doesn't have a lot of SDE, is you're one crisis away from real crisis, like collapse. And you hit crisis after crisis after crisis. And if there had just been an extra $100,000 lying around, you might have been able to neutralize these problems by just throwing money at them. But there wasn't that extra oxygen. How do you think about buying small? Do you still think that like it can be worth the risk, and sometimes people just have to do it? Or would you say to people, don't do it no matter what, don't do it? How do you respond?
Yeah, my advice, especially for first timers and buying small, is really understand what the operational things are, like the business is doing, and know that you're going to have to do some of that. Like, you're going to have to learn it just to work with employees, or you're going to have to learn it because something's going to happen. I think that's one of the biggest risks of small, is because you don't have a team, you don't have a management layer, you don't have equipment or resources to be able to have resiliency and backup. So if something does happen, you pull out the spare. Like, it's like driving without a spare tire and getting a flat. Now what do you do?
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Well, I got that phone call at 4:30 in the morning, and it took 6 hours to get sorted out, and all these impacts. So that's probably one of the key things is, buying small can be okay, but thinking that you're going to be able to work on the business when you buy small from the very beginning, I was probably naive into that, and when I bought it, John was already targeted to be the ops manager. I took him to Florida with the training. I was one hire away from having him as an ops manager. Instead, I had to hire 3 people to replace, people that are leaving, on top of the equipment breaking down, and that set me back from getting, another van sorted up. So, I think that's what the risk is you're going to be into the weeds far more than you think you might want to, if you have any intention of not being in the weeds and, working on the business. You're going to be in it. You're going to be in it. I was jumping on the van, slinging grease with everyone else. And, that's not how I wanted to spend my days, because I'm not practicing as much as the guys doing it every day either. Not that I was doing it unsafely, but I'm, not as efficient. And, it's then you're like, why am I spending my time on this? I'm not doing anything strategic. So that's where you can get into some real, just frustration. It's like, every day that I was on the van, it's like, I'm really frustrated because this is not how I wanted to be spending time. So I think that's, that what I would advise people to do is, really spend some time with whatever it is, and envision yourself doing that And then if you're one or two employees, half your staff leaves, you're doing it. So it's still a risk. And that's where that balance comes in is, when you go big, you got more financial concerns, you got to take on more debt and investors and all that other challenge. So I didn't do that. But then by going small, you are one key person away from, a real problem. Like, everyone wants to get into an organization where everyone is replaceable. We're nowhere close to that. No one's replaceable. So I treat them like gold. I mean, I try to treat everyone as well as I can. It's working so far.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's really clarifying, Monty. I think that's really good. That's a really good kind of litmus test. It's like, if you're going to buy small, you have to be willing to do the delivery of the service that the business offers its customers, because you may, in fact, have to do it.
I would even go one step further. I said you should expect to do it. Mm-hmm. And that's even a little further mind shift. Like, I did not expect to have to do it. Like, I expected to have to do it, but I didn't expect that I was going to need to do it because someone called out sick and equipment broke down, and key customer calls me on a Saturday afternoon driving back from visiting my parents and like, hey, our oil didn't get changed out. And I was like, oh yeah, I forgot he was sick and missed it. And I didn't know he didn't go back, because I was dealing with my family stuff. So Saturday night, I'm in a dining hall myself until, 1:00 in the morning on my Saturday night doing the work. That was also back in March. That was not fun.
Anything else, Monty, that we haven't touched on that you would want to share with everybody?
I think there is merit to the whole strategy and the roll up and all that. I think, looking back, my naivete or whatever you want to call it, or I don't know. It was the expecting the extent of things that can go wrong, and then like what are you going to do about it? I don't know. There is a way to due diligence now, well, especially on the small stuff. But I was probably emotionally unprepared for some of this, especially given my family situation. With having those reserves. So I will kind of, on the closing side, cite, my wife is just the most wonderful person ever. And like, she's been a rock for me. And actually looking back, when she got laid off, it was a crisis. Then it turned into an asset because she started helping me with all of this, and we got to spend time working together. And that was really nice. And now she's, looking to get back into W-2 land next month. But making sure you also have a significant support system that understands what you're doing and is willing to put up with the garbage, because you're going to be angry, frustrated, worn out, short-tempered, like all that negativity. It's expected to come up. Don't think that it's not going to. And I didn't expect it to come up at that level of magnitude, and that caught me off guard. And so I've been doing a lot of work to try and reduce the stress and reduce all this. And it's still not there. I mean, I'm still frustrated pretty quickly because I don't have the reserves left. And so building up, you can't even build up a stockpile. So those kind of reserves. But you can build up a stockpile of, your network and your team of people that can help you through that. And don't just leave it to one spouse or one person, right? Because they're going to get burned out of you being burned out. So trying to spread the negativity wealth or the challenge wealth, if you want to call it, is just as important as spreading out the positive wealth. But I think having that resiliency of people around you that are, willing to help, especially on small, I think it'd be a bit different if you're going, you're big and, you just bought what was the last episode I listened to? The $3 million roofing business with a whole bunch of people in
Austin
there.
Smoke.
Yep. And just listen to that. When you got that much that you can hire out, he's still doing 17 hours a week for a few months, or a day.
Right.
But, that's probably the biggest guidance to have is, expecting some of these things happening and then making sure that at least you have a support system or something to get through it. And I got a little bit blindsided.
Yeah. Well, and just to tack onto that, not just kind of expecting the worst or being prepared for the worst and looking around you to make sure you have a support system, maybe giving a heads up to these people in your orbit that, hey guys, this could be really, really hard. I listened to this podcast where there's all these horror stories and I might be about to be one of them. So, give me some give me a long leash. I might be needing to lean on you here for the next few months, kind of give them a heads up of what to expect.
It's not even just a little heads up. I mean, looking back, I should have had like a real sit down and almost like I don't want to say formal plan of like, I had no idea it was going to be that tough with all those issues culminating between, cancer and breakdowns and people out and bull. But, I did do a lot of check-ins and, I hope I did it well. She still likes me. So, I think it's even more of a heads up. I think it's probably really having some thoughtful conversations, knowing what I know now and listening to some of these and talking with others. I didn't have any of my family do that. I mean, they trusted me, and so they went with it. But I wish I had done that.
That's a great piece of advice to end on. Monte Marcum. If people want to get in touch, what's your preferred way to be contacted?
I don't do the Twitter. Probably not going to do the Twitter. So I'm on LinkedIn, and you can put my email in the show notes. I'm one of those types. I like to talk with people, but I'd like to do it when I could schedule the time so that I can be fully present and not distracted. So I prefer to set up an email call. And happy to take them and happy to tell others, here's what I think on stuff. I actually want to do more of these deals. I don't want to operate. Into the future, I think one of the questions you asked me, would you do it again? I was like, yeah, I'll do it, but I don't want to operate. I want to put the deal together, the team, but I do not want to be on the operational side. I'm too old at this point. More now. But yeah, email for a phone call. Be happy to.
Well, Monte, I know you said I don't want to just keep taking it, but from where I'm sitting, if you can pull through this and get some breathing room and get a little extra capital coming in so you can work on the business and upgrade, I guess, promote John into operations manager, you will have learned this business so intimately, so well, and shepherded it through 3 and 4 crises. And the fact that you like doing deals, you will be in a phenomenal position to then do territory 3 and 4 and 5. So I see, getting through this really, really hard thing, but then I see a lot of potential in the future. And I love the business model too. So
I think the model's great.
Pretty neat.
The model looks great.
Yeah. All right, sir. Monte, thank you very much for coming on and sharing with us. Have a good weekend.
You too. Bye.
I hope you enjoyed that interview. Make sure you subscribe to the Acquiring Minds channel below. We are now publishing twice a week, so tons of new interviews and stories to come, stories that will help you along your own path to acquiring a business.